Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Mistake Zone, your weekly dose of our lives and the mistakes within them. My name is Jaren Wade. Joining me, as always, one of my best friends in the whole wide world, Matt Alba. Hey, Matt.
Yo.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Matt, that's great. Matt, I want to thank you. I know you're in Japan right now, and the time difference is probably a killer. I know you're having some good times with our best buds, Rakush and Kevin, but Matt, duty calls, and I got to thank you for stepping away, hiding away during your adventures to record a poopcast with me. But Matt, where do you think you are right now in Japan? Ballpark.
I'm going to assume that right now in Japan, I'm in Kyushu.
Okay.
Somewhere in Kyushu. That's a very safe bet, I think.
Okay. Not inside baseball for all our friends right now. We're recording this notably early just because, again, you and some of our close friends will be on a adventure. And I'll be at home trying to do some small projects on my end. But Matt, you're feeling good. I'm feeling a bit self-conscious just because I'm not sure how much my room is echoing right now. And spoilers for all our friends out there, this might be a Jaren heavy episode. So if you can't get past the echo, I apologize. But Matt, despite this being recorded a bit early, you know we have to, Matt. You know I have to pop one open for Jaren's Kira Kira sparkling water review. Matt went back to Bubly this time, and I have a pineapple bubbly sparkling water. Matt, when it comes to pineapple, how do you feel about pineapple in general?
I've grown a lot more fond of it recently. I actually used to really dislike pineapple, maybe up until a couple years ago, but it's grown on me.
Matt, have you ever been to a Brazilian steakhouse where they brought out the grilled pineapple?
Only once, and at that time, I was not really a pineapple fan.
Oh no, Matt. I think we need to make this happen one of these days. We gotta go for that grilled pineapple. But in the meantime, for me, once again, pineapple bubbly, and here is time to make our friends uncomfortable with another Jaren ASMR. But Matt, this is okay.
Oh, okay.
This reminds me of shock pineapple juice, but not as strong as pineapple juice. Potentially a watered down pineapple juice with a carbonated kick. I feel like this sets out what it's trying to do, Matt. This pineapple bubbly has that essence of pineapple, but I don't know about you, but with pineapple juice, I feel like I apologize if this sounds a bit gross, but there's a thickness to pineapple juice, which I kind of appreciate that this pineapple bubbly doesn't have. Like, it gives you everything you would expect from something pineapple flavored, especially a pineapple beverage, without that thickness, which I do appreciate. And yeah, I like this, man. I like this. Normally, not a fan of pineapple juice on its own. I prefer it to be more so used as a marinade or used in desserts. But as a beverage, I like this. I think this would, you know what? I would put this above the Farm Boy Orange, but below the President's Choice Orange Cream Soda. I think the Farm Boy Cucumber Melon was somewhere there, but Matt, I don't have the Excel open right now, which I have to go back to, but it shows you how much I prepare for these episodes.
Oh, man.
But Matt, that's a good beverage. I look forward to sipping on that when I'm dying for talking your ear off for the next, I don't know, hour or so. Hopefully not hour or so. But Matt, with that out of the way, what else is new with you, man? What have you been up to this week that will be heard by our friends in the near future?
Jaren, in real time, like real this time, last week, I talked about how I'm playing Diablo 3.
Yes.
Jaren, Diablo 3, if you liked how loot pinata-y Diablo 3 was before, man, you're gonna really, really love Diablo 3 now. Because Jared, this thing is even more of a loot pinata, and it feels really, really good.
Okay, Matt.
hmm
So I'm guessing you're playing through a new season.
Yes.
What character are you rolling, Matt?
I am using both a barbarian and a necromancer.
Okay. Any notable changes that kind of got you excited to come back to D3? Again, considering that there is a newish D4 out there.
Um, like initially, I just wanted to play because the boys are playing, so I gotta go. I gotta hang out with my boys in Diablo
Right,
3
for
land.
sure.
But I don't know, the quality of life changes that they added to Diablo 3 are really, really good. Like, they got rid of a bunch of grinding. They made leveling up multiple characters a lot easier on your own. You don't need to rely on people to rush for you now. They added kind of like another long-term ish goal to like set for yourself, like, or like track to follow. And I don't know, Jared, like the I hadn't played for maybe like 10 or so seasons. So coming back in with, I guess, like that much additional content is a very, very nice change. And
Okay.
all the quality of life just makes this game feel right now really, really good for me.
Matt,
Mm-hmm.
I know this is going into a topic we didn't really expect to go into, but I'm actually genuinely curious based on how much Diablo 3 you've been playing recently.
Uh-huh.
And when you talk about quality of life, of course, you're coming back after 10 seasons
Mm-hmm.
since you last played, but is there anything within your current time of Diablo 3 that just wasn't in Diablo 4 and you're actually surprised by its absence in the most recent game?
I think the thing for me is that Diablo 4 is just a bad loot treadmill.
Hmm.
It feels good at the start when you are, able to use the treadmill properly. You are able to, hey, get a piece, and then it leads you a little bit further to this next piece and to this next piece. It's just that Diablo 4's loot treadmill stops, like, or slows down really, really, really abruptly at around level 50, 60-ish. And you have still, like, Diablo 4 also differs from Diablo 3 in that you don't really expect to reach max level very quickly in Diablo 4, which, like, is fine. I think that's fine. But the fact that you are both not at max level and not always, like, constantly iterating on your gear feels really bad. When in Diablo 3, it's the type of game where you reach max level and that's where the game starts, and then you start iterating on gear like very quickly. And I don't know, just the fact that Diablo 4 failed to be a good loot treadmill is a really, really, I don't know, big thorn in me wanting to, or like trying to enjoy it.
Okay. And that's fair enough, Matt. And I know those were some of the complaints you had when we, talked about the game,
Mm-hmm.
I believe last summer, but with Diablo 3 right now, Matt, I
Mm-hmm.
know there were some cosmetics that was really appealing to me back in my time of D3.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, gotta ask,
Mm-hmm.
what cosmetics are you rocking right now?
Sharon, I'm not really using that many of my own like cosmetics that I gained throughout the like my I guess like previous D3 career. Like I think
Right?
I'm still
Like the season renewal rewards, right?
like I am really just using the in-game transmog system. I just
Right.
really like the transmog system. It's so simple, like it's pretty clean, and it lets you have a lot of variety without like it lets you have a lot of variety and like still feels like pretty like not overwhelming and not boring
Okay.
to like, get everything into like your design or access like to design with.
All right. Fair enough, Matt. Fair enough. I don't know. Seeing that pep in your step when it comes to discussing Diablo 3, I'm tempted, Matt. I'm tempted. But of course, you're in Japan
Uh-huh.
right now,
Jared,
as our
I just
friends are
realized I
listening.
may also
What's
also
up?
be on a plane while this is
Oh,
this is dropping.
fair enough, Matt. Fair enough. But maybe that's something I might peer into, or maybe I should just get around to actually playing through Diablo 4 at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
Matt, D3 sounds pretty good right about now, especially if you like that loot explosion, that loot pinata. But that just means I have to reinstall BattleNet and see my library of games that I also would potentially poke my head, peek around, because I know with Hearthstone,
Uh-huh.
I think I've hit that, the threshold of, oh, you haven't played enough or in X amount of days. So why don't you come back in and we'll give you a free deck of cards? And I remember last time I logged into Hearthstone, I think I had around 200 unopened packs and all, like between all the expansions, between all the different login rewards. And I
Uh-huh.
think way back in the day, our pal Kevin, speaking of, your Japan trip, our pal Kevin gifted me like 50 Ungoro packs for those who know what that means. But again, Matt, it's always that, I don't know, before we kind of move on to the crux of this episode,
Uh-huh.
Matt, when you look at your library and then you see a game that you had an affinity for, but you haven't played in so long, do you have that kind of paralysis about hitting that install button to check it out? Is there a point in time where so much time has passed that you just don't want to bother?
I think so. Like particularly for games that like, you needed a skill to play. Like for
Right.
example, like I'm looking at my BattleNet right now. StarCraft 2 is the one that like leaps out to me the most. Where I would need to spend time getting my legs back in StarCraft 2, knowing that like, hey, where I'm at right now is way below where I was back then. Even if back
Okay.
then I wasn't that high. But I don't know. Like Jaren, whenever I look, speaking of last week's episode, always want to go back to APV. But I don't know, Jaren, that might just be some good memories and good times.
Fair enough, Matt. Fair enough.
And then Jaren, I look at all this like all my VR games, and I made space for them. I don't know, a while ago, and I played a bit, but then I bought a new shelf, and that shelf is now covering one of the, what do you call it, VR receivers that I installed on a wall, and I'm too lazy to move it because that would be a lot of work. But I don't know,
So,
Jaren.
Matt,
I'd like to go back.
you're telling me you're never going to play VR ever again?
I think I will at some point. I just need to
Okay.
like unscrew this from the wall and like put it somewhere else. I'm just not sure where I'd put it.
Okay. Matt,
Hmm.
wait, full circle. Do you have to consider the feng shui of your room if you're installing a VR sensor?
Jaron, I think for this one in particular, I would, because the wall that I installed it on is the wall with the outlet. So if I move
Hmm.
it, I have to like string a, I don't know, cord across the doorway almost to get it back to that plug.
Oh man, Matt. And then you have to hide that cord as well.
Mm-hmm,
You have to make
mm-hmm,
it look good, Matt. Got to
mm-hmm,
make it look good for your, because Matt, if
mm-hmm.
your room looks good, I think you'll feel good
Uh
to some degree.
huh. Jared, I also
Just like,
reassembled my rock band drums, and I don't know where to. I don't want to unassemble them now.
well, I guess I know what I'm doing when I'm visiting the Saturday morning arcade clubhouse next
Oh
time in the
man.
area. We'll get the band back together, Matt. We'll get the
Mm-hmm.
band
Mm-hmm.
back together. So, Matt,
Mm-hmm.
with, I guess, when I intended to start my no recent activity or, the Steam segment where I go through my Steam library and play games that I haven't played before,
Mm-hmm.
I think deep down there was one game in particular that I think I wanted to use this segment in particular to actually play through because I felt like now was the time to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
But before I get into that, Matt,
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna take you back
Okay.
to the golden year of 2019.
Good year. Good
Matt,
year. Mm-hmm.
it was a good year, but I remember you were telling me about Demon Slayer. I think it
Yes.
was either episode 11 or 12 when our boy Tanjiro was fighting the demon who can move the room using the drums on his body.
Mm-hmm.
And towards the end of that episode, I asked you if there were to be a Demon Slayer game, one that wasn't the typical Bandai Namco anime game, would it play more like a Platinum Bayonetta like, or would it play more like a From Software Sekiro like? Matt, does that ring any bells for you?
Not particularly, to be honest.
Okay. Matt, it was a
Uh-huh.
good year, but we talked a lot during that year.
Uh-huh.
But fast forward to last December when we were talking about the Game Awards, specifically for that trailer, Kamori.
Mm-hmm.
Kamori? I think it's Kamori. Matt,
Mm-hmm.
classic. I don't know how to pronounce things,
Uh-huh.
which you'll get a lot of in the next kind of segment. But if we were being completely honest, what was shown of that trailer was pretty much all style and no real substance to what the game will actually be when it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I think we wondered, in between, will this be a co op hunter game? Will this be a PvP game? I think by the end of it, I asked you, would it play again more like a Platinum Bayonetta like, or would it play more like a From Software Sekiro like?
Mm-hmm.
And if we had any preference. And Matt, I come to the mistake zone late to the party once again, but I think I can answer those questions or those thought experiments a bit better now.
Okay.
And Matt, the spirit of Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, is something that I would like to see serve as the foundation of a Demon Slayer game, to serve as the foundation of something as stylized as Kamuri, where traversal, the stealth, and the sheer beauty of combat would lend itself to those worlds. And of course, I'm talking about Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, the From Software game
Mm-hmm.
from Matt. You know what trips me out?
Hmm.
This game came out March 2019. It feels so much older than it actually is, and I'm kind of floored that in our golden year of anime, this
Uh-huh.
game came out as well, which I don't believe we really mentioned other than, hey, would a Demon Slayer game play like this? But before I kind of get into my time with Sekiro for the last month, Matt, when I say this game came out in 2019, does that surprise you, make you feel anyways, or?
To be honest, Sharon, I thought the game was older than that. I
Mhm.
thought that sounds to me recent, but I don't know. Something about it, something about Sekiro, I guess, just made me think it was older than that.
I think time is just so weird to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
this is gonna sound like hyperbole, and I understand that I could very well still be in that honeymoon phase, but I think Sekiro might be one of my top 10 games all time.
Oh damn.
Like, I started playing this over a month ago, and this game has honestly just consumed me in a way I didn't expect. Where whenever I had a morsel of free time, whether it be my lunch break, when my partner was asleep, moments when I just had the house to myself, I would come back, boot up Sekiro, and continue to essentially ram my head against this brick wall of a game.
Uh huh.
And Matt,
Uh huh.
as the game's name and seemingly every Steam review suggests, every time I fought a named enemy, let alone a boss, I died twice. Then again, then again, then again. And yet, I'll be completely honest, Matt. As
Mm-hmm.
someone, I believe I said this to you on Discord, that if I were to ever play Sekiro, I would download mods the moment I got frustrated with the game.
Uh huh.
And I think that was my safety blanket going in, which is kind of a slippery slope when you think about it. Of, okay, I'm going to play this really difficult game. And the moment I don't find it fun, I'm going to install a mod to make it easier.
Uh huh.
And I feel like that brings you down two roads of, oh, I'm just going to find any excuse to install a mod, or maybe I'm just going to continue to truck through before I get to that point. And Matt,
Mm-hmm.
even though I said I would install mods the moment I got frustrated, and mind you, I got frustrated a lot. There's
Mm-hmm.
just something about Sekiro that made me wanna, pick myself back up. That one more try feeling, because overcoming whatever the game puts in front of you, as unfair as it may seem, it always feels like victory always feels like it's within grasp. It's one parry string, one Makiri counter, one sidestep, one jump away, but eventually it feels like it's in sight. And once it comes together, once everything clicks, Matt, it's exhilarating. I legit
Yeah.
can't tell you a game in recent memory to make me feel the way Sekiro has made me feel after it all comes together. And I think we discussed it at length during our Elden Ring episode, where the From Software games have this reputation that precedes them, that their games are brutal, they're difficult, they need you to commit to your follow through, because one misstep most likely means you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And chances are, when you die, that takes, I don't know, an hour or so of progress with it. And with Elden Ring, I was someone that got, not to brag because I'm a pro gamer or anything, Matt, but I got all the vanilla achievements using our boys, or, the dynamic duo of Comet Azure
Uh
and
huh.
Mimic Tier. It
Oh
was
man.
a very passive aggressive approach to, this kind of game that doesn't often afford you the luxury of playing that way. And to remind our friends once again, Matt, I'm just bad at video games. I am, if you will, a baby who cannot get good
Uh
at
huh.
video
Uh huh.
games. And I think that's why Sekiro has always been so elusive to me. And I've said this on record numerous times, and I think I said it again when we talked about Lies of P a few months ago. Parrying and aggressive combat is just not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think the concept of parrying made me realize how playing rhythm games on a plasma TV, using component tables, was a detriment to my timing, which speaks
Oh.
volumes to why I can't full perfect songs in rhythm games.
Uh huh.
And what I mean by that is, I think my muscle memory is tuned towards how I calibrated Rock Band and Guitar Hero growing up, where even though I see a note or I see an attack coming at me, I'm hitting it just a little early or just a little too late. In the case of, I guess, Rock Band and Guitar Hero, I'm still hitting the notes, but not perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of parrying or a combat that revolves around parries, I'm just early blocking, which isn't great. Especially in a game like Sekiro, where if you block too much, that means your posture meter goes up. It eventually gets broken, and you're legit just vulnerable to a flurry of attacks. So,
Mm-hmm.
not a good time, Matt. And I think that was my mindset early on with Sekiro of, I'm bad at parrying. I'm going to be bad at this game, but let's just go at it anyway. And to be honest, my early hours with Sekiro was the closest thing I had to, Matt, tell me if you have experienced this, but the early hours of Sekiro for me gave me the same energy of me renting a game without a memory card, where I would kind of play the same parts over and over again just because I couldn't save to go far enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I installed the game on my Steam Deck, and it's deck verified, it ran great. And before bed, I would find myself for the first week or so, just grinding certain areas over and over again. You know me, Matt, getting those trinkles of XP because fights against the normal mobs in this game,
Mm-hmm.
it just feels so fucking good, Matt. Like when early on, when enemies can telegraph their attacks and then you can get that parry timing down, it's so cool. But the moment I needed to go in, learn attack patterns and mechanics of named enemies,
Uh-huh.
that's where the whole process feels daunting. It doesn't help that I would refer to a game facts guide, shout out to our upbringing, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
after a few deaths, I would go to a guide to see if there was a way to cheese at least one health bar from a boss. But more often than not, I was met with a lot of, you can't cheese this. This is a gimmick fight. This is going to be difficult. This is going to require all your learnings up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was against Lady Butterfly where I was almost at my breaking point. And I'll mention a few notable bosses later on, but I think Lady Butterfly primed my turnaround for this game, ultimately, where essentially during the course of Sekiro early on, you meet an NPC who gives you a bell. You activate this bell that teleports you to another location. You make your way through this level, you fight your fair share of named enemies, mini bosses. That could be cheese to some degree. Matt, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
bad shinobi because for some of these bosses, it would be a lot of me kind of trying to kite them away, reset their AI path, and then go in to get a few free hits or so.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I digress. Um, and then you eventually get to the boss of the main boss of the area, who is Lady Butterfly. And everything up until this point felt manageable for me. And then here comes this older woman who was just straight up overwhelming. Flurry of attacks, quick attacks, some gimmicks as well. And she would always build up my posture, knock me down, and I died a lot. But yeah, despite reading guides, it was that fighting game conundrum that I usually run into where I could try to study the theory, but in practice, my brain just becomes mush and I can't comprehend everything that's happening.
Uh-huh.
And I think I just went to bed frustrated that night and thought, oh, I'm going to download a mod
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Jaren, I'm
But
surprised you didn't mod the game at all. Like, not even switching to a female character or something.
we'll get to mods, I think, at the end, just
Okay.
because spoilers, Matt. I got to the point where I think I deserve to have my dessert in the
Okay.
forms of mods.
Okay.
But two things happened after struggling with this Lady Butterfly fight.
Mm-hmm.
The first being, I was talking to my friends who are, one was more so a Soul veteran, and one, he's just good at video games in general. That latter friend, he told me straight up that, Matt, love this guy, but I don't believe him because he said he didn't understand a lot of the abilities or pairing mechanics. So the reason it took him like 100 hours of the game was just because he was doing the tried and true Dark Souls sidestep dodge and going in for an attack, where I
Uh-huh.
think he's a madman, but he's
Uh-huh.
also good at video games. So I can kind of see that happening. But I was talking to my Souls veteran friend, and he told me that Lady Butterfly, while, you know, she was difficult, she wasn't necessarily the first boss you're supposed to fight. And he
Uh,
recommended that I, just keep going, get a bit stronger, learn a few more skills, and come back. And again, Sekiro is not like Elden Ring, where I could just farm a Raven for 8 hours to get my stats up. But, I kept on trucking on until I got to the first real boss, um, Gyubu Oniwa, or again, I can't pronounce things. He rides around on a giant bull, and of course, I died a lot. But
mm-hmm.
unlike Lady Butterfly, I feel like it was starting to come together more in this fight, where, on one hand, it's a lot more manageable than Lady Butterfly, but it was one where with every death, I was understanding his tells better, the patterns better. And as weird as this sounds, Matt, because I feel like it's a cliche at this point when you talk about Sekiro, I think this is when it clicked for me, where I turned back to my tried and true low and slow approach, where,
Mm-hmm.
needless to say, a lot of boss encounters for me revolves around the classic find an opening, get one or two shots in, see if I can bait a recognizable parry chain,
Mm-hmm.
and then get out. Run around the arena if I have to. Do this for 10, 15, not gonna lie, 20 minutes at a time, Matt.
Uh-huh.
Wind them down and eventually make it through. Where I think this game is all about it finally clicking, not just for each boss, but for the game itself. As a From Software baby, it's that realization that the game doesn't just want you to, but it requires you to slow down your pace in a way. While there's definitely dexterity, reflex, and skill involved, I think it's overall Sekiro is a game at odds with itself that you need to learn how to navigate those kind of differences. Where with combat, especially, while you need to be really aggressive, um, while you need to be on the tails of the bosses all the time, it also
Mm-hmm.
wants you to fight them at a pace where you're not just blindly swinging your sword, where you really do need to have this weird calculated approach while still being aggressive, if that makes sense. And once this clicks for you, once you find that balance, it becomes a game where everything you can do just becomes beautiful, Matt. Where
Yeah.
going into Sekiro, I only
Mm-hmm.
knew three things about this game.
Mm-hmm.
One, it's fucking hard, of course.
Uh-huh.
Two, there's a Gorilla Ape boss that is fucked up. Sorry
Yeah.
for swearing so
Uh-huh.
much.
Uh-huh.
And three, the most important thing I think is it's more akin to a dance, a waltz, and in some respects, a rhythm game where a lot of people before were surprised that I never played Sekiro and kind of, compared to the rhythm game, something I didn't, think made sense just because the rhythm games we're used to playing, we have notes scrolling to us.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
there really is a rhythm to each of the different fights, to each of the different attack patterns. And once you figure out that rhythm, that you feel like such an anime protagonist when it all comes together. Not
Uh-huh.
Sekiro is so anime, but it's once you get to that payoff of being comfortable with it, it's the most anime. And what I appreciate most of Sekiro is how it essentially forced me out of this well-defined comfort zone that has given me such, and in turn has given me such an appreciation for these type of games that I never had before. Yes, parrying is a big part of the game, and
Mm-hmm.
each boss has a handful of attack strings, each with their own rhythm. That once you're comfortable, it just feels amazing to parry, Matt. The idea of the posture bar, being there to discourage you from straight up blocking a lot. Since again, once your posture is broken, you're pretty much dead in the water.
Mm-hmm.
But even if your posture bar is so close to being full, as long as you're deflecting, it doesn't teeter over, which again, it so many times have I found myself against the ropes, one bad block away from my posture being broken, one hit away from seeing the death screen. And yet, I think in that state, it kind of just encourages you to go for it. It wants you to be aggressive because who knows, maybe you'll go on a hot streak, maybe you'll break their posture first. Yes, enemies have their own health bar, which you can chip away with. And oftentimes that's what I did. But if you're aggressive enough, you can break their posture and open them up to massive damage. Where fights that took me 10, 15, 20 minutes, I'm looking online and they can be done within 2 to 5, which is kind of insane.
Yeah.
But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, even though it's such a parry heavy game, it also wants you to slow down to its pace, and it really doesn't want you to parry everything. Enemies have
Okay.
unblockable moves denoted by this flashing red kanji notice that appears on screen. And here it's all about learning, oh, do I need to sidestep? Do I need to jump over? And sometimes, do I need to stomp down on their thrust attack? While I think parrying has become synonymous with Sekiro, I think the combat wants you to engage in all these other mechanics too. Not only just so you're not relying on parrying, but to be honest, Matt, a lot of the other dodging mechanics just look really cool too,
Um,
because ultimately there are times you need to utilize every tool at your disposal. Going back to the reputation that precedes From Software games, I think just the boogeyman status that this is a hard game, mixed in with the fact that there are so many things thrown at you, just to straight up intimidate you, to make you frantic. I think that's what the game, going into the game, made me so scared of, Matt, if I have to be completely honest.
mhm.
And again, you run into bosses with multiple health bars, bosses that are just massive, scenarios where you're just straight up overwhelmed. You're constantly presented with daunting feats that you mentally have to sort through, if that makes sense, where you know you're not only in for a grueling fight that will last minutes, but you're also facing a steep learning curve that may be hours.
Uh-huh.
So it's just daunting to look at, to come across a boss and think, okay, this is going to take like hours of my life. And part of the game clicking, in my opinion, is understanding how to see past all that noise, to keep calm and continue at a solid pace. Because ultimately, I think Sekiro is also a test of patience. It's not, Sekiro is Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
Uh-huh.
I think being able to also pause the game during a fight really helps you catch your breath,
Oh yeah.
to kind of take a moment during some of these intense encounters in order for you to remain, just to keep your composure up and hopefully not choke towards the end of a fight. Because, Matt,
Hmm.
whoo boy, let me tell you, a lot of choking being had during
Yeah.
my playthrough of Sekiro. But Matt, please forgive me before I keep going on, but have you played Sekiro before?
No, I think the closest game I played to Sekiro was like Wolong, way back,
Right.
like when we started season 5 or 6.
Yeah. So, something like
Five,
that.
five, yeah.
555. But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
needless to say, Sekiro is a hard game. It can feel unfair at times, especially if you're not used to, Souls likes, to action games, to, the quote unquote hardcore games, whatever label you want to give them. But if you're willing to put in the time, once it comes together, it's such a gorgeous game, Matt. The combat itself just looks fluid. Attacks are animated well, and transitions into the different mechanics, whether it be a counter hit using, a prosthetic ability, a dodge, it just flows so well. And once you're confidently alternating between attacks, parries, jumps, dodges, counters, it's not, speaking about 2019, it's the promised Neverland,
Oh
people,
man.
if they made a game.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that the only thing really missing is a legit in-game replay editor akin to Skate, where you hit the select button and it just takes you to a timeline that lasts, that has the last 1 or 2 minutes that you can scroll through, edit, change the camera, etc. That's how gorgeous and fluid the combat is for me, where even when you're not utilizing all the abilities to the fullest, it just looks cool. I told you that I grinded the starting area a lot early on because I was scared of bosses, and I honestly didn't mind, just because fighting random dudes, satisfying, that really
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
satisfying. And I think there are a few aspects that I wanted to mention and kind of get your thoughts on. The first being dragon rot. And
Okay.
Matt, in Sekiro, there's a mechanic called dragon rot. essentially it's the death penalty in the game is you lose half your money and half of the experience points you have towards your next skill point.
Mm-hmm.
And once they're gone, they're gone. Unlike the Souls games, unlike Elden Ring, you can't go back and get your money, get your XP.
Oh no.
And you have something called unforeseen aid, where there's a chance that you won't lose any of it if you die. However, the more times you die, the higher the chance you'll get something called dragon rot. In lore, it's a disease that affects NPCs, makes them sick, which prevents you from progressing any quests or using their services. And early on, I thought the game implies that NPCs could straight up die from dragon rot if left untreated. And Matt, the way to treat dragon rot is to use an item that is somewhat rare. I only found a handful during my
Yeah.
playthrough in the world and at various vendors,
Uh-huh.
where I'm not sure if NPCs actually die, but it was this fear where I literally made a backup save before every named fight. And after, if when I died, if I had dragon rot, I would reload the backup. I think that's the loop that got me and almost made me want to quit the game, Matt. But I looked it up, and apparently NPCs don't actually die from dragon rot. Again, you just can't progress uh, their side stories or kind of any missions that they're part of if they have dragon rot, and but no one will straight up die from it apparently. And once you use that item, everyone that has it is cured. I think a good rule
Oh,
of
okay.
thumb I saw was that you can die as much as you want, get as much dragon rot as you want, but after beating a major boss, which means getting an achievement or seeing a cutscene, you can then cure everyone and check to see if anything is new, if quests can be explored, and stuff like that. But in terms of a death penalty, Matt, what do you think of the concept of dragon rot and kind of affecting not only yourself but NPCs as well?
I feel like that's kind of weird. Like
Hmm.
I don't know if maybe I'm just like missing something from the context of I guess like the story or something.
Yeah.
But it seems weird that they would put a mechanic in the game that stops you from progressing NPC quests. Like I
Yeah.
don't understand it from a game design point of view, I guess.
Hmm. I think with the story of Sekiro, you have, I guess, this divine hare who is essentially immortal and he has, dragon blood within him. And whenever one of his aides, which is Sekiro, his shinobi, he dies, he essentially uses life force from the divine hair air. And as a result, some bad juju exudes from him and then goes into the air. Stuff like I think that's the kind of explanation where
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
if the divine air is being, having to use his ability, then he also has to exhume the bad parts of it as well, which kind of affects NPCs. That's probably a bad way to explain it, but Matt, in terms of story, I'll admit that Sekiro is probably. I know this is an unfair comparison because the only other From game I played was Elden Ring, but at least there was a coherence to the Sekiro story because I couldn't even though it's been 2 years, I think 2 months after playing Sekiro, I couldn't tell you what I couldn't tell you what the story to Elden Ring was, but
Uh-huh.
I digress, Matt. I think I go back and forth between Sekiro being at odds with itself for a few odd aspects. And the first being your prosthetic arm and its abilities.
Mm-hmm.
In lore, Sekiro loses his arm at the beginning and is given the shinobi prosthetic. This serves as your additional abilities in game. When it comes to reversal, it allows you to grapple points in the world, and you can unlock a skill that lets you grapple enemies during certain moments of a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I love grappling, by the way. I think it's really
Mm-hmm.
satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also unlock abilities along the way that you use in combat, such as a shuriken, an axe, a spear, a shield, etc. And they open up some really cool combat opportunities. And when you start upgrading them and unlock their variants, they can really even the odds during some of the more daunting boss fights. You can have up to 3 abilities equipped at once, and then you can cycle through them with
Mm-hmm.
Y.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the issue with using the abilities is that they have a cost to them, and that cost is spirit emblems. And you can only hold on to so many of them at a given time. Where I think for most of the game, I could only have 15 or 16 on me, and the rest would go into my storage. Now, spirit emblems can be found in the world, dropped by enemies, and then you can exchange some currency at the bonfire or the idol to get more as well. So essentially, it's still a finite resource that you have to grind for in order to use the abilities. And as much as I wanted to use them in battle, I found myself only pulling them out in emergencies, where realistically I would only commit to them during a boss fight that I knew was going really well for me.
Mm-hmm.
And after I had finally killed a boss, that had me on the rope for a few hours before bed. Again, I would go to grind farm loops to replenish the money and the emblems I lost. Where I get why they do it, since from a balance perspective, some of the abilities are really strong and could trivialize some of the encounters if they were infinite. But at the same time, though, I feel like if they were on cooldown or something else instead, you could really experiment more. And I know, again, Matt, I don't know much about Bloodborne, but I know even your Estus Flask equivalent has to be, you have to kind of grind for as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't as bad as Bloodborne, but in terms of abilities costing a resource that you have to grind, um, how does that make you feel, Matt? Does it make you less inclined to use abilities as well, or does that not really matter to you?
Yeah, that kind of makes me like. I'm assuming it's grinded in the way that you would like, for example, like grind money in a
Yeah.
game, right? Yeah, that makes me not want to use it at all. I think
Hmm.
in that case, I would learn to not use the ability because Jeremy, what if I need it later?
Yeah, that's true. And I know there were sections where, oh no, these rabid monkeys are attacking me, and I can probably kill them out of the difference using my shuriken. But what if after the monkeys, there's a named enemy that I could better use these abilities for?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like I had a lot more hesitation when it comes to the abilities.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of forces you to get more up close. But likewise, Matt, you unlock additional sword abilities or combat arts through your skill tree. You can only equip one of these at a time, but they include things like a whirlwind slash, overhead slashes, sheath stance attacks, leaps. Matt, they're essentially your demon slayer breathing techniques.
Uh-huh.
And while you have so many to choose from, only being able to equip one really stops you from
Oh.
seamlessly experimenting with them,
Mm-hmm.
comboing with them. Maybe it's because I frankly just didn't use them a lot, where I'm not sure if it's a balance thing where you can use, if you were able to use a lot at a time. But I think it would have been cool if it was like Code Vein, where you could equip up to 4, and then if you were to say hold down a button and hold down a trigger, and then one of your face buttons become
Mm-hmm.
each one of these combat arts. But yeah, I think just being able to equip one at a time meant that I'm not really experimenting. I found one that kind of generally works as an all-purpose move, so I would just stick with that throughout most of the game as well. And I mentioned these points because for the most part, I really just stuck to the basic attack throughout the whole game. Uh, that was the bread and butter, and it wasn't until I was in a more comfortable situation that I used abilities, that I used combat arts. There's this simplistic beauty to just going in with your basic attack, parry, dodge, and jump. And while you can definitely get experimental when you're more confident, I see potential for ways it could allow for more variety if, the combat system was just open up a bit more. And I think another aspect that I feel is at odds with itself is just how much stealth there is in this game. Matt,
Mm-hmm.
Sekiro is a shinobi, so of course you're expected to be this precise, silent assassin who is a master of combat. Matt,
Yeah.
not me though. A lot of times I would blow my cover and have to run away for AI to reset, as I
Classic
mentioned
stealth game.
before.
Classic stealth game.
And for the most part, it presents you with a lot of opportunities to stealth through locations, to at least even out battlefields, taking out fodder so you're just left to fight the big named enemy. Even with some bosses, there are opportunities for you to stealth, intentionally and, cheese at least one health bar from them. And while that does feel cool, it ultimately doesn't really help when you're in the thick of it with a boss, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. What I mean is, for a combat focused game, the stealth aspect doesn't really contribute to your combat growth. You sneaking around, baiting, and isolating enemies makes sense in lore, but it really does nothing for you when you're going blow for blow with the bosses. It doesn't help with your parrying, your game reflexes, but man, at least it looks cool, and there are nice farm spots that are just pure stealth. But speaking about going blow for blow with bosses,
Uh-huh.
at the time or after my time with Sekiro, I do understand the criticism of how grueling these fights can be. Again, with proper skill, these can be over in minutes if you're skilled enough. But I said it before, for me though, every named encounter, I was staring at a fight that could take anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen or so minutes, let alone to get there, I would need to get through, I don't know, half an hour or more of deaths. And for some of the fights I'll mention in a bit, those were literally 2 hours of me bashing my head against the
Uh-huh.
wall
Uh-huh.
each. And the game can feel so unfair since these fights can be so long, and yet one slip up, one attack that catches you off guard can end that run. And that's an aspect as a player I had to overcome, just how gut punching it is to see how much effort you need to put in to essentially dent an enemy as opposed to being swatted away effortlessly like by a boss. And I can't tell if it's by design, frustration, or a mix of both, but the pacing of the fights can really feel like they drag on, especially if you're not comfortable with them, if it hasn't clicked for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Mm-hmm.
a daunting game overall. Granted, part of the learning process for me, at least, was literally that low and slow approach of going in, getting a few hits, and then running away screaming as I wait for a
Uh-huh.
move that I could hopefully punish.
Mm-hmm.
This approach severely prolongs fights since your enemy posture rapidly um, drops. A good deflect parry chain mixed with a well-timed axe ability can shred enemy posture, but again, it's trying to position yourself into an opportunity while remaining aggressive. That is part of the challenge. And I think in general, when the situation presents itself and it actually flows, I think the grapple hook traversal is pretty fun. In areas such as the castle, where you could stealth around, grapple in, take out a dude in a crowd of people, and then grapple out, I think that feels really cool.
Uh-huh.
Instances where you can dodge a boss attack and then grapple your way in for some blows is satisfying. Heck, even when you need to reset an enemy AI route, Matt, the grapple is pretty clutch.
Uh-huh.
But there are also instances of platforming, and for the most part, they're only serviceable at best. Some instances, you'll see a marker for a grapple hook, and then it will just not turn green, meaning you're not really close enough to use it, which I thought was kind of I think that's a bad design element where, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I see a grapple hook or a mark. I assume I should be able to grapple it if I get close enough. But it's one of those instances, Matt, where, oh, even though I see this mark on the ground, I have to be higher up to actually use it. So I don't think that's great, if that makes sense as well. Or, you might take a leap of faith and miss time when you need to grapple, causing you to plummet to your death and lose a bunch of
Oh, that one's
experiences.
gross.
Yeah. And Matt, for
Mm-hmm.
some platforms, you need to do this thing where you essentially double jump, in a sense, where you jump at the wall. I guess wall jump, jump at a wall, jump again, and then thrust yourself upward. For a game with such a beautiful animation, I think it's one of the weaker. Actually, no, it's the weakest site, since Matt, Sekiro just doesn't look cool wall kicking. I think it's a bad
Oh.
animation. It just doesn't look nice. And worst of all is when you need to double jump and hit X to grab on a ledge above you. So many times I found myself just double jumping at a wall, mashing X, holding X, hoping he would just grab it. For an elite shinobi badass, it's a pitiful and unfortunate sight with him just jumping and not grabbing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key is, like a lot of the game, you need to get the rhythm down
Mm-hmm.
for him to grab, which is AAX. But again, Matt, it's really bizarre. I don't know. Grappling and platforming is really weird about the game.
Uh-huh.
But what I appreciated about Sekiro is how grounded it feels when you first start off the game. It has this feudal Japan background. You're pretty much just fighting other samurai and grunts in the beginning. But as the game progresses, it becomes weirder and weirder. All of a sudden, as I said, Matt, you're fighting monkeys with swords. You're talking to pots with arms poking out of them from under the lid. Sorry. There are giant snakes, huge apes, a giant carpfish that rivals the eel from Mario Kart 64.
Nice.
There are immortal monks with parasites inside them. That it
Mm-hmm.
scales really well, and at times it's just straight up anime, where the first time you fight um, sorry, let me try to get this name, Matt. Uh, Jenny Chiro Ashina. He's the same samurai who that essentially kills you in the beginning of the game, but uh, you fight him again of like I think midway in the game, and
Mm-hmm.
once you get to his second phase, he essentially bulks up and a lightning bolt strikes his sword. And somehow this is just the tip of the anime iceberg. There are times when you're countering lightning attacks and then sending it back to the boss where you can't just help but feel like you've made it through your own personal Dragon Ball fight arc. Again, while I appreciate the simplicity of the combat and my favorite boss encounters are the more grounded ones where you're just straight up trading blows with them for a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
there are those few gimmick fights, those, that sometimes the game just becomes so animated, but that you can't just help but get hyped and buy into its spectacle. And I think I can't put a bow on Sekiro without mentioning two of its infamous boss fights. And that, don't worry, I'm almost done. Uh, but yes, there's a guardian ape fight that makes me scream. But more specifically, I wanted to mention the demon of hatred and the final boss, Ishin the Sword Saint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the demon of hatred is an optional boss you can fight towards the end of the game. I think from a pure size perspective, it's probably the biggest boss you fight. Its size mixed with its aggression really makes it a intimidating fight. When I first stepped into the arena, I literally couldn't comprehend how to actually fight it.
Yeah.
Wide radius attacks, frantic movement, getting close seemingly meant I was dead. Again, that's what this game is, trying to remain calm and look past intimidation. I think it was a grueling fight since it was mostly surprise me running in a circle, waiting for a move that I could run in, do a few hits, and then running out screaming.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the time it would be me waiting for the green marker so I could grapple in, try to time an air attack, but that air attack would only hit like 60% of the time. And then I would again frantically try to run away again. At one point, his charge attack literally knocked me off the stage, and I went to bed that evening, Matt, where this was definitely a war of attrition and lucking out during his third phase, where I was able to avoid his attack that encloses you within a smaller arena of fire,
Mm-hmm.
and then hitting him with essentially a one of the abilities you have is like essentially a whistle, which will put certain enemies into frenzies, kind of call enemies towards you. And there's a variant called Malcontent, which will stun him for a bit. And I was able to get him into a stun loop, plus using a few items that made me more powerful against these types of enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that means nothing to you, Matt, but it was one of those instances that makes you realize that, oh, you can't rely on the basics for some of these bosses. You need to pepper in all your learnings, all your abilities, upgrades, and items. And for, finally, Matt, we get to the final boss of the game. I do like how it's a full circle moment where in the beginning of the game, you walk through the secret passage to get to the field to meet Kuro, the divine heir,
Mm-hmm.
and your master, and then fight Ashina. And at the end, you walk through the same passage to get to the field to meet Kuro, and then you have to fight Super Saiyan Ashina. And Matt, this
Mm-hmm.
is a 4-phase fight
Oh.
where if essentially, Matt, this is
Uh-huh.
going to sound gross, but it's one of those fights where if you need to use a healing item during the first phase, then honestly, just reset the run at that
No.
point. Like
No.
you need to, but this is the beauty of, I guess, Sekiro. In the beginning of the game, Jinichiro is the guy who kills Sekiro. And at the end of the game, he's just the first phase of the final boss that, once you get used to the combat, you're kind of disposing relatively quick. And Matt,
Mm-hmm.
once you beat Jinichiro, you fight his grandfather Ishin. And I think this literally took me 8 hours over the span of 4 days to finally put a bow on this game, Matt.
Damn.
And I feel like with every other boss in the game, the Demon of Hatred included, those bosses ultimately had maybe half a dozen, several attacks to keep track of. With Ishin, I feel like he can do 12 different things. He's frantic moves that go from vertical to horizontal, AoE sweeps and projectiles. And then after clearing the first health bar by the skin of my teeth, phase 2 starts, he adds 12 more moves to his arsenal. He literally takes out a spear, breaks my posture. I'm lying in the ground defenseless, and that
Mm-hmm.
he shoots me with a fucking revolver. So, as someone that didn't grow up with Battletoads, batshit difficulty, Matt, I wasn't hardened by NES games growing up.
Uh-huh.
And again, I'm bad at games in general. Ishin is probably the hardest thing I've ever fought in a video game. So many times did I hit my desk out of frustration that I had to walk away in hopes that it would finally click the next time I tried, only to stare at a dozen or more death screens. And I just want to shout out Reddit, GameFAQs, and YouTube because, Matt,
Uh-huh.
for those 3 nights before drifting to sleep, I was reading guides. I was watching any piece of advice that I could, get my hands on how to tackle him. And once that 4th day came around, it happened, Matt. It clicked. It just felt right. I was deflecting when I could, properly dodging whenever I saw the red kanji.
Mm-hmm.
And when phase 3 came around, Matt, it
Mm-hmm.
was reaching peak levels of anime where there was just lightning striking all around us. We're clanging and banging our swords. And there was even one instance where I jumped to avoid a lightning attack, but that turned into the lightning counter. So it just felt right. And to see that final death blow marker, Matt, it was peak anime.
Uh-huh.
And not gonna lie, fucking cried at my desk, man. At that moment, at that moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could beat through the fire and flames on expert.
Oh man.
Maybe I could beat Mike Tyson. Maybe, Matt, maybe I don't have to rely on Comet Azor when Shadows of the Erd Tree comes out.
Oh damn.
For that brief moment, Matt, that brief moment, after I gave a sigh of relief, maybe, just maybe, anything was possible.
Oh man.
And it's not a game for everyone. I fully understand I sound like a raving maniac, similar to those JRPG apologists who go on and say, it's okay, bro. After 20, 40 hours, the game becomes really good. Stick with it.
Uh-huh.
But seriously, as someone who is awful at video games and doesn't really care how you play a single player one, my advice after finishing Sekiro is don't be too scared of it if it's something you want to try out, you know. And even if you try it and think it's too hard, you start to think maybe I'll install a mod, maybe just sleep on it, take a breather, and try a few more times before you actually do mod it. You know, I'm not saying you need to get good and that you should do what honestly, you should just do what you want in a single player game. But honestly, give the game and yourself a chance, because once it clicks, once the pieces fall into place, Matt, once you get by with a parry and a prayer, it's exhilarating, Matt. This game is so good. I'm a Sekiro truther now, and I know I've been talking your ear off, Matt, but as I said before, I finished the main course of Sekiro. I'm proud of myself, but now it's time for dessert, Matt. Now it's time to mod Sekiro to look like a pretty anime lady. And Matt, modding this game is difficult.
Oh.
Where there's a mod engine, and then you just drag mods into the mod folder. Easy, simple enough, right?
Yeah.
Like, not gonna lie, I'm on and off trying to finish up all the achievements, which means finishing the game, I think 3 more times to get the other 3 endings.
Oh damn. Can I just load an earlier save for an ending thing?
You can, but there are, I think I guess you can, but I think there's 1 or 2 endings that you actually have to do a new game for, unless I mod it to give me more XP or something. But I'll look into that. Matt. Actually, I would have to play through it at least 1 more time, because 3 of the endings, if you do all the steps proper, you can get at the end. But the 4th ending, which I guess is the bad ending, you get that during the middle of the game, oddly enough. Okay. But in terms of the character mods, it's kind of weird where you need to download the mod installer, copy like 3 different files into the game folder, create, another folder to kind of save the presets of the game, and then replace those presets, like the default presets, with the new mod stuff. And then I think where I'm kind of being hung up on downloading character mods, Matt, is the fact that I want to have the female voice in the game. Not female voice, even though Sekiro only talks like a handful of times, but like the female attack screams or like the death voice lines or whatever. And to be able to install a voice mod, you have to download the mod installer, download the voice mod, copy 3 different files into the game folder, create a mod folder to hold all your mods, and then you have to go into the sound folder, copy the Sekiro voice onto your hard drive so you have it in the future, then replace it with this file that makes your character sound like a lady boss from Bloodborne, but there's just like a lot of steps, and it's the fact that a lot of these mods came out when the game was in 1.0.4, and the game right now is in 1.0.6. So I think a few of the mods I've tried just don't work because of the version difference. And again, no one's updating these mods because it's like a 5-year-old game. So I think that's why I haven't made my character 2B. That's why I haven't made my character Taki from Soul Calibur. And honestly, Matt, even though there are mods to make my character, Kanata from Hololive or Aroha from Hololive, I just want a character that looks like they fit in the Sekiro game. And to be honest, Matt, a lot of the character mods I saw just clash too much and contrast too much to the game itself that I just didn't bother, Matt. So I have played a bit with, the Infinite Spirit Emblem mod and kind of reduced damage mod, just because, Matt, I earned my way. I just want to breeze through, get my endings. And I think another reason why I also recommend people at least stick with it a while, like stick with vanilla a while, is when you download like the reduced damage mods or increased damage mods, fights against bosses and notably quick, even quicker than, the optimal 2 5-minute runs that good people are getting, where I think I faced Lady Butterfly with like a easy mode mod on, and that fight was done really quick, where I felt like I shouldn't death blow her to finish the fight, where it was just me parrying her attacks for like 3 minutes because I felt like I was doing that boss a disservice by not letting this fight play out. But I'm just a weirdo, Matt. Do whatever you want. Just, this game is cool. It looks nice. I think, by the end of it, I thought, Matt, this would make a great foundation for a Demon Slayer game. I think, again, if Kamuri even played a fraction like this, I'd be really hyped. But Matt, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, it was such an experience for me, and such a contrast of what I'm used to. Got me out of my comfort zone. And if you're thinking about it, just go for it. Play until you get frustrated, download a mod, whatever. It's a good time. And at the very least, you can mod Sekiro to have a Louis Vuitton shinobi outfit. Amazing. And I think that's pretty cool too.
Amazing.
But Matt, I want to thank you for once again sitting through my TED Talk. I'll try to send you some at least potential timestamp titles, but Matt, that was me talking about Sekiro. Hopefully this can be something you and the pals listen to on the plane if you're bored, or get some sleep, whatever. But Matt, want to thank you as always for joining me, editing this fine pod and putting up with my nonsense.
Yo, Jaren, I want to thank you for dropping this essay on the mistake zone.
Thanks, man. I want to thank Sekiro. I want to thank Kuro. I want to thank Emma. I want to thank the sculptor. I want to thank that other divine child who I'm not sure if she actually had a name. And I want to thank people who make guides for the Ishin, the Sword Saint fight. Because I hope it got to me eventually. Got to be eventually. And Matt, not sure where you and the pals are right now, but I hope you're enjoying your trip. And to all our friends out there, I hope you're doing well as well. But for now, Matt, please take it away.
This has been the Mistake Zone, and we're all out of Jaren using Comet Azure.
No, we're not, Matt. No, we're not.